Hey guys, welcome back to Inside Cut. So today we'll be talking about the Australian Grand Prix and how it went. I'll give you the gist about the qualifying as well as the race. So let's start with qualifying. Sergio Perez was put in a car that he was uncomfortable with. He did look a little bit loopy in the third session of qualifying, and by him I mean his car. Sergio Perez is a person who is calm and he does the job that is given to him, but the car matters, right? The driver and the car have to be in the same position to get the best result possible. So that wasn't the case for him on Saturday. He red flagged the session. So the team, they tried their best to get him back on track, but it ended up red flagging the whole session for a brief period of time. So that was game over for Sergio Perez. The other people who were struggling were Oscar Piastri and Valtteri Bottas. Oscar Piastri being the homeboy, he did try. He wanted to make a good impression, of course. For obvious reasons, but the car setup. The team didn't get the car setup right. McLaren have not been the brightest this season. They wanted to come out with a bang here at Australia, but they got the car set up a little bit wrong, and it ended up with a struggling Oscar Piastri. But he did, he pushed through it. He was focusing on what was given. He was focusing on what result he wanted, but it didn't matter because there was a lot of traffic on track as well. The other person who got into traffic was Valtteri Bottas as well. Traffic being a lot of cars coming into the track at the same time, and the drivers didn't expect the traffic to be so high. So Oscar Piastri as well as Valtteri Bottas, both of them were trying their level best, but they couldn't get past Q1 because of the traffic, of course. One man who's been shining throughout the first three races is Hülkenberg. He's outqualified his teammate again. I think it's 3 for 3. It's 3 for 3. So and he got into Q3 for the first time this season. This is his comeback season, of course, and he's making a good run for his money. And another person who picked his teammate was Pierre Gasly. Of course, Ocon did look good. His car looked good, but again he got into traffic, and Gasly just went for it, and he put his car into Q3, out qualifying his teammate. The other person who came into qualifying was Albon. All these names, they're given mediocre cars, and they're doing extremely well with whatever they're given. Albon, this is his first Q3 since Belgium last year. There's no words. Hats off to Albon for this. So there was a short period of time when all of us thought that Hamilton or Fernando Alonso would get into the pole position because Max Verstappen was complaining about his downshifts and the battery. Just for a recap, Hamilton got his his last pole was at Jeddah in 2021, and Fernando's last pole was way back in 2012. But Verstappen, of course, pimped both of them for the pole position. You can't complain about this car. The car is too good, as well as Verstappen. He's been carrying out his form from the past 2 seasons. He's gained a lot of experience. Hats off for him for getting pole. And P2 was George. We thought that if Hamilton and Fernando, if they didn't get pole, they would at least finish P2 and P3, but it was George. We did not know where he came from, but it had something to do with the misfortune for Lewis Hamilton. He got stuck behind Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg didn't block him intentionally, but he did get stuck behind him, and it was just P3 for Lewis and P2 for George. but the Mercedes looked really good throughout this season, throughout this race week. Toto Wolff did tell everybody that the car looked really good, and he was banking and counting on the car to do well this season, this race week. I think Mercedes will be banking on getting more points than the Red Bulls, given that Sergio Perez is out. Another team I want to talk about is Ferrari. They thought that they had their car set up. I mean, they thought their car was sorted, but they got held up by these red flags and interruptions. Of course, interruptions being traffic. Of course, they're supposed to be a top level team. They can't be manipulated by these small interruptions like a mid-range team or a below par team. They're supposed to outlast them so that they can come out on top. But yeah, that wasn't the case. The car did look good, but if these small things are going to be affecting Ferrari, then we got to question what good they might do, at least for the first 5-6 races. So that's it for qualifying. So let's get into the race. It was a beautiful start for Mercedes, a soft start for Max Verstappen as he was struggling for tire temperature. So yeah, George Russell made a move on Verstappen in the first turn, and Hamilton made a move on Verstappen at turn 4, giving Mercedes P1 and P2. But the P1, P2 was put on a halt at turn 4 itself because Charles Leclerc couldn't catch a break. The man went sliding off, and yeah, as I mentioned, he couldn't catch a break. Last year's race winner here at Australia, it was game over for him. He did look good throughout this race weekend. Did look good on the qualifying as well, but his race didn't last four turns. So yep, that was game over for him. And it was P1, P2 for Mercedes. So right back at the restart after the yellow flag, Mercedes still had P1 and P2, and Max was starting to pressurize Hamilton. So this led to Hamilton pushing even more and putting pressure on George Russell. So another man who couldn't make a move up front was Carlos Sainz. So he was stuck behind Fernando Alonso for about 4-5 laps. He couldn't do much, and he didn't want to do much, of course, but because he wanted to contain his tires so that he can make a push later on. But this yellow flag and these drivers and a lot of other drivers too who were struggling, it triggered the respectable race engineers to make their cars come into the pits for an early pit stop. And some of the major drivers who went into the pits early were George Russell and Carlos Sainz. So I mean, this seemed like a really good move for them, and yeah, they came back on track, and it looked really good for these cars who made an early pit stop. One of the cars who didn't pit was Alex Albon, and he was running, I think, yeah, he was running P6, and I mean until the 7th lap, of course. It was tough luck for him. He lost his rear, and this led to a full red flag. Right up until then, Lewis Hamilton was questioning his engineer as to why he didn't come into the pits. The reason being P1 and P2 were Mercedes, and they were really close, so it wasn't even possible to do a double stack. So as Lewis Hamilton was questioning his engineer as to why he didn't come, he can't go because there are certain rules between the drivers that they have to respect, which being that if either car, so let's give an example as to if Russell was P5 and Hamilton was P6 in a different situation, the strategy will be more superior for the car in front. In this case, it was George Russell running P1, and he had the superior. It was his call to if he wanted the pit stop, he can make it. So he did come in, and Lewis Hamilton was questioning this. But yeah, after the seventh lap with Albon's incident, uh, the session was red flagged, and this meant that it was a free pit stop for everybody. The cars who didn't come in early, they get a pit stop. They just have to reset their cars in the pit lanes, and they can change their front wings as well as the tires. As to, they can change their tires as well. So George Russell, who was P1 after the pit stop, was P7 and was making a move actually. As soon as he was trying to breeze past through everyone, but because of this red flag, he was stuck in P7 again, and Carlos Sainz got stuck way back at P11. So at the restart, it was Lewis Hamilton P1 and Max Verstappen P2, and P3, of course, Fernando Alonso. So right from the start, again, this was the second start, and George Russell was flying. I mean, he made a move. He straight up made a move on Stroll, and then on Gasly. He was really in the mood to go for some racing today. Yeah. So Hamilton, as I mentioned, he got in P1 because of the red flag. He couldn't hold on to that P1 for a long time because Max Verstappen, it's just not Max, it's the team. Red Bull's car, it's really amazing. It had a brilliant, they had a really good straight line speed, and that led to, a quick P1 for Max Verstappen, and I don't think Hamilton could resist. Russell, as I mentioned, was brilliant from the second restart, but had an engine issue. I think, it was an engine issue. So he didn't put throughout this race weekend. He didn't put a finger wrong. He did everything by the book. He was orthodox, but it was race over for him. Hard luck. We can't do much. Perez, of course, was in the mood, using all of his tires right from the beginning. He had a set of hards, and he was making all the moves at Albert Park. Pierre Gasly was another lucky driver to have gotten into P4 because of the red flag, but he had to work really, really hard to stay over there until Sainz made a lovely move on him. Gasly being a driver from a mid-range team at P4 is something that Alpine can only dream about. So he was doing an amazing job keeping up that P4, but Sainz was just he really made a beautiful move on Gasly and sent them up to P5. This was definitely a better race for McLaren this week, considering how both, considering they've been bad for the past two races. The cars were competitive. Both cars were slow on the straights, though. Albert Park is a circuit where you need a car with good, a good straight. This was definitely a better race for McLaren this week, considering how poor the performance was in the past two races. Both their cars were slow on the straights, though, but the car was very, very competitive. Albert Park is a circuit where the cars need a good straight line speed, but they couldn't do much. They were put in a car and they were doing the best they can. Just to add more, Lando played the patient game and got through Hulk. Hulkenberg was defending really, really well right from the beginning. But he couldn't hold on to Lando. I think Lando tried to make a move for like 2 laps, and on the third lap is when he got through Hulkenberg. That was some good defending that Hulkenberg did. So the race was a complete. I have no words for this race. It was one of the best that we've seen in quite some time. After Lando made the move on Hulkenberg, we could see a lot of moves from Sergio Perez as well. This man was all over the place. I've got more words for him, and I mean, I'm unable to speak out on him. I've already spoke about him so much, but yes, he was really in the mood today. uh, he really came up to the top. I mean, that was just hallmark stuff. Yep. So the race was seemingly going all right. Max Verstappen just kept leading the race. I think he made about 7-8 seconds from Lewis, and Fernando, of course, was behind Lewis for the most parts of the race. I don't think most parts is the right word here. Lewis Hamilton straight up at P2. He managed his tires well, as well as kept Fernando Alonso at bay at P3. Fernando Alonso, king of defense. I mean, there was not much to defend. Lewis Hamilton really just kept a second and a half, maximum 2 seconds on Fernando Alonso, and that is how it was going right up until K-Mag lost his right rear tire by colliding with a corner turn, and this led to another red flag, meaning everybody came back to the pit lane and the race was set to be started for the third time. So yeah, and the third restart was an absolute rush. Sainz took out his fellow champion. I want to say mentor as well, because both of them are from Spain, and Sainz grew up watching Fernando Alonso. So he just took out his own hero, and Stroll just went through a corner. I mean, I don't know what happened there. So yeah, Fernando Alonso was furious, and Perez he went off wide too. Just a couple of more cars on the wall, and it resulted in another red flag towards the end of the race. I mean, it was such madness that nobody knew what was going to happen throughout the end. The third restart didn't even last for about 4 or 5 corners. So they just called it a red flag, and it was the cars again relined at the pit lane. So yeah, so Perez ran wide, so was Gasly. Both of them just wanted to avoid collisions, but Gasly, trying to avoid collision, just came back in the middle of the track, and which that resulted to him in the middle of the wall. I mean, yeah, that wasn't a good move for Gasly. He tried his best to stay out of it, but once he stayed out of it, he again came back into it and lost his car. So yep. So the third restart saw both Alpines losing their car. Stroll straight up went to the gravel. I mean, yeah. So, Tsunoda and Bottas were the two cars who were set to miss on points there, because the third restart was supposed to be, after a red flag, the cars are supposed to go around the track behind a safety car, and this happened right on the cusp of the last lap. So the stewards made a decision that Fernando Alonso should be given his place back because of what Carlos Sainz did. Carlos Sainz, it wasn't intentional. He could have avoided that collision, but he wasn't ready for it. So he was given a 5-second penalty. Carlos Sainz tried pleading out of it, but there was nothing he can do about it. So yeah, Fernando Alonso was a person, was a car who came back up front after his car took a hit from Carlos Sainz. So which resulted in Tsunoda and Bottas to miss some points over there. So as soon as Sainz got his 5-second penalty, this led to cars like Tsunoda and Bottas, who I mentioned that they were the cars that were lucky. They were cars that seeming to be unlucky, but because of this 5-second penalty which was given to Carlos Sainz, all the cars behind Sainz was at play. They all wanted to make sure that they were as close to Sainz as possible, and yeah, Tsunoda finished P10 and Bottas finished P11. Carlos Sainz, because of his 5-second penalty, finished P12, and of course Oscar Piastri, homeboy, came out to P8. This was his first points as an F1 driver, and he did it in front of his home crowd. This is something that he would have dreamt of, and he's got that in his bag now. So yeah, tough luck for Ferrari. This was Red Bull's first time coming P1 in the first 3 races of a season. Merck, I mean, I gotta talk about them as well. The first 2 races, the team weren't as confident on the car, but coming into this race week, as I mentioned, Toto Wolff gave a beautiful update about the car, and the drivers did too. Love driving the car this weekend. Up until George Russell couldn't. He had a car issue, he had an engine issue, but that didn't prevent Lewis Hamilton from doing something. He finished P2 at this race, right behind Fernando Alonso. Right behind was Fernando Alonso with P3. So this was an all-world champion podium. I mean, it was a champions podium, yes. So P1 was Verstappen, P2 Lewis, and P3 with Fernando Alonso. So that's it for the race and the Australian Grand Prix. Thank you. Like and share and do follow us. Thank you so much.